What happens when a marriage feels beyond repair, when years of disconnection, frustration, and silence seem impossible to overcome? Today's guest, Larry Bilotta, knows that place firsthand. After spending 27 years in a loveless marriage, he reached a turning point that didn't just change his relationship, it transformed his entire life. For more than 2 decades since, Larry has helped tens of thousands of people reclaim their sanity, rebuild their relationships, and take back control of their mindset. His message is both simple and deeply hopeful. It only takes one person to begin healing a marriage. In this episode, Larry shares the powerful shift that changed everything for him, the principles that have guided so many others to transformation, and why, no matter how desperate things may seem, there is still a path forward. If you've ever felt stuck, discouraged, or ready to give up a relationship, this conversation may just change the way you see what's possible. Welcome to our show, Larry.
Thank you, Rena. Very much, very nice to be here.
Going back to your own experience, what was the exact moment or realization that shifted everything in you?
So, so, uh, so Marcia is the girl I'm talking about. She's my wife of 40 years, and when we married in 1974, that was the beginning of the awareness that something is very, very broken. And at the time, I don't know anything. I don't know about why people do what they do. I don't know about personalities. I don't know anything. Because I don't know anything, I'm upset by kind of everything. And so because I'm upset by everything, I'm reacting to everything. And because I'm reacting, that means that I'm reacting and then she's reacting to my reaction. Because that chain is working over and over and over again, I'm really in a bad place. So that's the start of my path. And so when it got really tense as those early years began, that's this in the 70s. I'm getting worse and worse as I'm reactive, and I want to react with a anger and I want to give back what she was giving me. So that's what reactive is. And when you're reactive, you're reacting to what somebody gives you. You got to give them back. I call that breaking Newton's law. And so breaking Newton's law is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so what is that? That's what everybody knows is normal. Normal is Newton's law. Newton's law for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction, and they live in that Newton's law. And so what I call it is breaking Newton's law. And so the reason you break Newton's law is because it takes one to heal a marriage. So how do you break Newton's law? So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Are you free enough to decide that you cannot react? And so that's like a very debatable idea. You can go to parties and all kinds of societies and debate that idea. Like, can you just decide not to react? Well, most people just they give up right away. No, you can't. You have to react. You have to, especially when you're more upset and more riled up, you have to react. So that's how they think. They think they can't break Newton's law. And so when I'm talking about breaking Newton's law, I'm really talking about the choice you get to make when you decide I'm not going to react. And what that means is when somebody says something to you that's very, very upsetting, something about your height, something about your weight, something about your sex, something about your gender, something that's like a broad thing that you identify with. If you get one of those, and then you're at the point where you must decide, what am I going to do, react or not react? You have to have an idea that you believe in, an idea that you can stick to. In other words, you can side up to that idea and suddenly bring yourself relief. So that idea is I'm I'm going to like myself. I'm going to like myself. I'm going to feel good about myself because what I've done, I believe what I've done is good, is really good things. And so because I believe in those good things, that's what I'm going to side up to. I'm going to side up to the idea that I, in this moment, don't have to react. I can choose to be an acceptor, a creator, a person who lives in the moment. And that's what all the people who've ever taught have all told us. Live in the moment. That's what they all say. Right, right? Books like The Power of Now and all that. They're all saying the same thing. Live in the moment. So what happens when you live in the moment? When you live in the moment, you can see everything as it is right now, and you're not looking in the past, and you're not looking in the future. Because when you look in the past, you'll look at what condemns you. When you look in the future, you'll be looking at what you fear. So those two places would be really bad for you. Stand up. So in the idea of I'm not reacting, I'm choosing to be what I'm choosing to feel what I'm going to feel. There's a strength that you give yourself. There's a strength that makes you feel like I like what I just did. I like what I believed in. I like what I said or didn't say, or if I didn't say anything, right? Because when you typically marry, you marry somebody who doesn't have your values. Your values are like I call it the invisible lifestyle. The invisible lifestyle is around the word lifestyle, and the lifestyle definition is a way of life or style of living that reflects the values of a person or group. So that's lifestyle. And what's an invisible lifestyle? A lifestyle where the values are not seen by you. You can't see them because what are we talking about? We're talking about the people who raise you. The people who raise you are the people who give you your values, and that's now the question. And so that brings us to the chaos to purpose scale. I've been using this for 15 years. And so I've been interviewing people, over 2,000 people, and I've interviewed them with the chaos to purpose scale. And my purpose is to find out where they are on the scale. So 10 is the best place to grow up. And that means mom and dad love each other and mom and dad teach and talk to you. And so now they make you feel important and valuable. And that's the best place to grow up. Because when you grow up there with values like commitment, loyalty, confidence, service, kindness. All those kinds of things are the values you grew up when you're 10. Okay, so that's the top of the scale. Now the bottom of the scale is 0. Now when you get down to 0, what you've done is you've found a place where you're abandoned, abused, and neglected. And so now that you have abandonment, abuse, neglect, now you're feeling a lot of chaotic values. Now, what kind of values are we talking about? We're talking about the value of selfishness, lying, gossip, stealing, defensiveness, doubt, meanness, all those values, and there's a lot, thousands of them. Those values are going to give you a very hard life. You just listen to anybody who's ever told a story about their life, and you're going to see the people who tell stories about a hard beginning, they're literally living in a bottom of the chaos, the purpose scale life. And because they're living in that place, they can't feel like they choose. They can't choose. They don't feel like a choice is not even available to them, right? They have to react. And so that's really what we're living in. We're living in a world with reactors, lots of them, and we're also living in a world with choosers, some of them.
But you say it takes only one of the two partners to change something. What if your partner refuses to comply and refuses to do
So
their part
that
of the deal?
so when you say when that partner refuses, what you're saying is this person is refusing to cooperate with you in your kindness and your goodness. They're not going to cooperate. They're not going to give it back. They're not going to break Newton's law. They're going to fulfill Newton's law. Okay. So if they're going to fulfill Newton's law, this has nothing to do with them because you are the chooser. You are the person who chooses. So when I was married to Marcia, and it took me a long time to learn this, I can't look cool now, but back in the 70s, I could not choose. I had to react. And because I could not choose, I could not decide to think. Because what happens when I talk to people who are in troubled marriages, um, I say, I want you to go back in those the days when you were like 3, 4, 5 years into the marriage. And I want you to tell me, give me a picture of what was in your mind. How did your mind look? How did it sound? How did your mind act? What was going on in your mind? And so I was just a guy I talked to today. He just said, uh, I was, uh, because I suggested one of the ways you could think about your mind is you have to be right. And so he heard that and he said, I don't think I had to be right. I think I had to correct things that she was doing. So that was in his mind. Correction. He had to correct her. And because he had to correct her, what was he doing? He was correcting a chaos kid. What is a chaos kid? Well, a kid who grows up in gossip and stealing and defensiveness, right? And all these negative things, right? What happens when you correct a chaos kid? Well, they go crazy. They go crazy with reaction. What else are they going to do? They don't know what else to do, right? But he didn't know he was married to a chaos kid. He just didn't know it. Because he didn't know it, he thought he could correct her. Well, there's no correcting a chaos kid. You can't even give a hint of criticism to a chaos kid. So what I talk about is the care and feeding of a chaos kid, because that's really what a chaos kid is. A chaos kid is like a very exotic animal. And so what is an exotic animal? An exotic animal needs a special enclosure. They need special food, special light, special environment, special all kinds of special stuff, right? That an exotic animal has to have. But if they don't get that, they start getting sick and they start having problems. So when you realize that your chaos kid is a exotic animal, you start to think of the care and feeding of a chaos kid. So what happens to people who care and feed exotic animals? Well, they're very thoughtful. They're very caring. They study. Oh my God, do they study? They the books and the videos they watch, it's just like they're very informed about this exotic animal. And so what do you have to do if you're married to a chaos kid? You've got to become like the people who care for exotic animals, the lizards, snakes, spiders, right? When you are caring for those animals, you really have to care a lot and you have to be informed. And so they're learning all about the animal, all about their environment, all about the kinds of water, the kinds of everything, right? So they're working on that because they're trying to care and feed their exotic animal. Well, that's really what a chaos kid is. If you marry if you're a man and you married a woman with abandonment, abuse, neglect, all three, and she's really low on the scale, maybe even a zero, uh, this is a woman who cannot hear the slightest hint of criticism, can't do it. And if you give the slightest hint of criticism, the slightest hint of correction, you're going to have all kinds of trouble because the animal is not doing well anymore, right? And so that's really what your responsibility is. Your responsibility as the person who is the one who heals the marriage is I've got to decide to use my mind to think the thoughts that care and feed my chaos kid, right? So if you're a chaos kid, if you are raised at a 2 and your wife is raised at a 0, that's a very chaotic home to live in. That's a very reactive environment that you can't survive. You can't survive a place like that unless you decide. And that's really what it all rides on. It all rides on a decision that you make in your mind. This is what I'm going to do. And so what's the first list of do's and don'ts? The first do is I'm going to start moving to love. I'm going to start leaving fear. I was maybe born in fear, but now I'm going to start moving to love. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, I really don't know, but I can start learning how because when I care and feed a chaos kid, an exotic animal, well, I'm going to learn a lot. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to study everything I can study, right?
Yeah.
Study books like the Joseph Murphy book about the power of your subconscious mind, right? That's a very, very positive book, right? And that helps people do things that they couldn't normally do because books inspire them to take on ideas that are not their own.
Yeah.
So
So
that's really what I
you've
did.
worked with so many couples. What are the most common mistakes people do in trying to fix their marriage?
So when we think in terms of common, that everybody does, one of the common things they do is they take their situation and they talk about it, and they talk about it a lot. And naturally, they want to find people they trust, people they like, people they know, which we call them experts, right? Those are not people we call experts. People we call experts are people we know, like, and trust. And who is that? That's family and friends. And so what do we do? Well, our first mistake is we go tell them about our troubles. And so what are we doing? We're actually going to people who care about us and they want us to get better and to feel happier. And so what's the first piece of advice that those friends and family give us? Run away. Because that's what we do. We run away, you should run away. And so that's what happens when you talk to family and friends. Like, I'm suffering here, I'm unhappy here. Well, then you need to run away because that's what we do. So that's why friends and family are not somebody you ever talk to, and that's one of the first and most obvious mistakes that people make when
Okay,
they
so
come
who
to us.
should they talk to? A marriage counselor or a professional?
Well, when you go into the world of the professions, The professions are trained by colleges, and colleges will take virtually anybody, right? They'll teach anybody. And so when you have people in the professions, counselors, therapists, coaches, advisors of all kinds, you really have to find a person who's got a knack. So there's people in the professions who don't have a knack. They don't have a knack for taking in all the information and simplifying and condensing it down. Some people don't have the knack to do that. And so what people will do who are professionals, who are in the business of caring for you, and I hear this over and over and over again. I've heard it for so many years. It's the idea that the counselor took sides. The counselor took sides. Now, why would a counselor take sides? I got two people in the room, and what happens is that person who doesn't have an act for this work takes the story of the person they feel best with, and they favor them right there in the office. They favor them. And the moment they favor them, the other person becomes highly offended and wants to shut down the whole process. Now, that's the greatest mistake of counselors, right? So when I ever hear the story of a counselor who had a sense for both people and had a sense for the sensitivity of both people, I know, wow, that's a gifted person. That's somebody who really has got a knack for this. And so if you go to professionals, you've got to find one who has a sense for keeping both people important and making both people valuable. And that is not widely available in every city and every town.
Yeah.
So that's
Uh,
what happens with people
so
like that.
is there really a point where you, as a professional, would say there is a point where these two people don't do each other any good? They should really separate, or
Okay,
should
so
they,
so now we're
or
talking.
should they really try one more thing?
So 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 when we talk about a person who's abandoned, a person who's abused, a person who's neglected, um, everybody knows that when you're abused, you're going to abuse. Everybody knows when you're abandoned, you're going to be abandoned, right? You're going to abandon if you're abandoned, right? So all the things that happen to you, you're going to do, right? And so now the question is, do you love your chaos kid? That's the question. Do you really love your chaos kid? Because I've talked to people who really love their chaos kids, and they really do love them. All right. And that means in spite of all of their flaws, in spite of all their discombobulated troubles, they still love that person.
Yeah,
Right. Women who love the men who love them, they love them. And so, and because they love them, they're not going to quit on them.
yeah,
Okay. And that's and I've talked to people who know what it's like to be discouraged. Like, oh, oh, this is it. It's over. See, why do they sound like that? They sound like that because their mind sounds like that.
mhm,
Their mind sounds like giving up. It's a normal thing for them to give up. And because they give up, they're going to give up on a real difficult thing called marriage.
yeah,
So the idea that kept me going and kept me alive, going through the really hard times, is the phrase, there's always a way. Now you think like, what a silly phrase that is. Well, it is not a silly phrase, and the reason it's not is because we live in a world that there's no way. The world is run by there is no way. That's impossible. There's no way. And that's a no way world. And because you're living in a no way world, when you have a phrase, there's always a way, you're literally correcting the idea of there's no way. You're correcting it and you're saying, I believe there is a way and I'm going to find it. And that level of determination is something you have to be married to a chaos
yeah.
kid, right?
Well,
Or to even be a chaos yourself.
if I look at my own life, I've been divorced twice. And
Okay.
I really love both women, but there was a point where there was no compatibility.
Okay.
There was so much stress in that relationship that I felt so exhausted, so burnt out that I had to leave. Uh, and in retrospect, it for me it was the right step in both cases.
So here's what you want to think about. You want to think about the early days of the love relationship. Because you find that in the early days of your love relationship, what happens to be when you're a normal person, you want to be happy and you want that person to help you be happy. And so that's what you want to happen. You want that person to give you the happy events, the happy feelings that you would like to have. And so we all have that. We all have that need. So what I'm not talking about is I'm not talking about living like that because I want that person to give me something and that person did not. And because they did not, it became unbearable. Okay. Well, that would be a normal way to exit the whole thing because it's unbearable, right? But when you decide in your mind that this person is worth living for, this person is worth liking, this person is worth loving, this person is worth kindness. When you decide, and that's really huge, the decision to act is the key to the decision to actually stay with it, right? So I've got to stay with it because I've decided to. And once I decide, something happens to your whole makeup psychologically and emotionally where you just, I decided. I decided because I know this is worth it. And because I know this is worth it, somebody's got to make a decision. So let's talk about making a decision. You had two wives. Uh, and so if you think about the two wives at their best, you had time with them at their best, right? But then,
Absolutely.
right? But then
Yeah.
there were times where they were at their worst, right?
Yeah.
So when you were at your best and she was at her best, you were both in a great place and you were both liking what you were getting. And so now you didn't have any struggles because you were liking what was happening. But then somebody made a decision. What happened? Somebody made a decision. In both wives, somebody made a decision. So what happens is like you're you become a reactor. Instead of a creator, you become a reactor. And so you react to her, and then she reacts to you. Then you react to her, and she reacts to you. Now, when those reactions are going back and forth, what's happening each time? Each time you make a decision to react. And that's, by the way, this decision, by the way, is very easy. When you make the decision to react, you're making a decision like, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to do this. And she says, well, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to do this, right? And so it starts to bowl stronger and stronger and stronger. So you left two wives. Why'd you leave two wives? Because you made a decision. What kind of decision did you make? I'm not going to let her get away with that. I've got self-respect. I like myself. I'm not going to let that happen. So you have the ideas of stop, don't, isn't, won't, no. You have all those ideas in you as a very negative energy. And when you have that negative energy, you can't make a good decision now because you have all those negatives in you. And now your life is about stopping something, reducing something, escaping something. That's what happens to you. And you can't get out of that because it starts to suck you in deeper and deeper. And if you're deep enough, you can't pull your feet out. It's like
Yeah.
quicksand,
Yeah.
just can't get
Yeah.
out.
Well, I would say in retrospect, um, love is not enough. Compatibility is the other big equation in the whole thing. We talked about values. If the values are no longer compatible, in my mind, that's the end.
Well, if you think about compatibility, um, and people love to talk about compatibility because it's such a likable topic. Um, so what is compatibility? Compatibility is I like pickleball and so do you, right?
Yeah.
Can so when they get into pickleball, what can happen? They can argue about how to play pickleball, right? I like natural vitamins and so do you, right? We're compatible, right? But can you argue about what kind of vitamins to take? Yes, you can. So
Those are the easy
compatibility,
ones. But when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, how to
yes,
raise kids, that's where the difficulty comes in.
that's right. But I'm starting with the simple subjects
Yeah.
just to illustrate the idea, right? Because when you finally decide that you are personally threatened, now you're not in a place of love, you're now in a place of fear. And all you got to do is make that fear decision and you're going to go down. And that's actually why divorce happens because people can't make a decision in their mind that they're going to love instead of fear. They're just going to not, they don't know how to love. They don't know where love is. What they know is what fear is. And they live in fear. And the fears are not like graphically obvious fears. These
Yeah.
are fears that are subtle and emotional.
I think that's an important point because I read about a statistic just the other day that financial stress is one of the major reasons for divorce.
Yes, yes. But if you come from a home that is a financially stressed home, that you have parents who know what it's like to not have money, they focus on lack. They focus on what they don't have, what's going wrong. That's a home you can grow up in. And so when you grow up in that home, there's going to be abandonment, abuse, and neglect are three little pillars, right? Neglect would be neglecting to teach, neglecting to help you see how to live. And so one of those ways to not see how to live is to ruin the whole way you handle money. Because what is money? Money is an energy, and money is an energy that you attract. And you attract it because you believe you can attract it. And if you can attract it, you repel it. And what repels money? Fear. Fear repels money. What happens to the stock market when people are full of fear? Full of fear, it goes down. What happens when they're full of certainty? It goes up. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But a
because
typical
what's
situation is you have a ping pong argument on how are we going to go on that vacation we can't
yeah.
afford.
Yes, but the decision to argue about something uh, where we're not so compatible, when you went to politics and religion, those are like fighting words, right? When you said politics and religion, I was staying on simple subjects, and you went to politics and religion because you can't succeed at differences of what kind of vitamins we should take. Uh, you're probably not going to do very well in politics and religion because you can't learn how to accept and allow somebody else to have a different belief than yours, because that all becomes threatening. And now when it becomes threatening, where do you go? Fear. You live
Yeah.
in fear and you can't get out because it becomes a way of life.
So you've helped thousands of people over the years. What typical breakthroughs have you seen in couples who really make it through difficult times?
Um, so when we think about couples, and by the way, I don't work with couples. I work with one of the couple. I work with the survivor. Who's the survivor? The survivor is the person who is raised higher on the scale, and they're married to the person raised lower on the scale. So I don't talk to the chaos kids. I don't typically work with them. I work with the people who are keeping the marriage together and believe in the marriage. Because they believe in the marriage, I've had people say it this way: I believe in my vows. That's what they say. So when they say I believe in my vows, I go, ooh, I got a real committed person. So I'm working with one person. That's why say it takes one to heal a marriage. Because what happens is as you start believing the idea that it takes one, you start to make a decision in your mind that you're going to be the person who changes the climate of the marriage, that you are changing the way you think about the marriage. And what are you going to change the way you think? You're going to start thinking very good thoughts, better thoughts, kindness thoughts, freedom thoughts, sensitivity thoughts. You start to care about her and you or him, and you're really concerned by thinking about what helps him. And remember, the person you're married to is a very reactive person. They're a little like a swirling ball of energy, and they can't be tamed with force or behavior. They can't be tamed by giving lectures or talking. They can
So,
only
so
change by
your
feeling.
advice is the first step is changing your mindset.
You change your mind, that's the first thing that happens. Because when you change your mind, everything starts to change in the world. Well, what's the world I'm talking about? I'm talking about the world of your perception. So what's the world of your perception? Well, the world of your perception could be the news, the national news, the world news. That could be your perception. But also your perception could be your garden, could be your dog, right? That's all of the world of perception, right? So your world of perception changes when you change how you think. So all the positive attitudes books that have ever been written have all said, change your mind, become a positive thinker, right? What's the old book, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking? What was the whole thing about? It was all about positive thought. It was just absolutely about positive thought. That's what it was all about.
So if I'm angry with my wife, I go into the opposite. I go into love. I go into good feelings. I go into kindness. Is
But
that your
that's because you made a decision.
okay?
There's people who haven't made decisions. They didn't make the decision. They're wishing they could be better, but they didn't make a decision. They're not saying, I am going to do this today. They're not, that's a decision. I'm going to do kindness today. I'm going to do forgiveness today. I'm going to do sensitivity today. I'm going to do it. And when you make that decision, something changes in you. Some big switch is made. And when you make that switch, you're starting to become the one who heals the marriage.
Which
Because
means you
what's
change the other person subconsciously.
well, a better way to say it is you change yourself and you change your own pain. You change your own heart. You change your own mind. And when you change that, it's to be by changing the way you think. And because you change the way you think, you're literally going to leave where you were raised on the scale. If you were raised at a 3 or a 2 or a 1, you're going to raise yourself to a 9. And why? Why are you a 9? Because you're adopting better values as a way of life. That's what changes your location. You don't have to stay where you were raised. Like there's some people who stay where they're raised because they can't think of anything else to do, right? But you can actually become a 9 by the way you think. Because you think the thought, you imagine the picture, and then you believe a belief.
Hmm.
And that's what leads you out of this life where you're not happy.
Yeah.
You're not going
And,
to be in
and,
a
and
place.
what practical steps would you recommend? We've just spoken about mindset, changing your mindset. Is there any actionable step that you would advise?
Okay, so we talk about the world of the mind and the world of the body. Okay, the world of the mind is where everything begins. If you don't change the world of the mind, it doesn't matter what you do in the body, right? So let's the common example of what people do when they're under stress is they go to the gym and they work out, right? And so when they work out or big workout, they feel better because they just use their mind to drive their body, right? So if you were a person who is going to use your mind to change your body, what's the first thing you do? You're going to eat better. You're going to make better consumption choices. You're not going to be eating cookies, cakes, and processed foods and soda and potato chips, right? You're not going to be eating that for a living. You're going to make normal your choice of food, right? And so what do we see about really troubled people? They have terrible diets. Why they why so there's a movement throughout the world where they're trying to change the way people eat. But the people who are not following that, the people who don't want to change the way they eat anything that makes them happy, anything that makes them feel good. So one of the big changes that you make in the way you think about in your mind is you change the way you eat, because that's what the people who are successful do. They change the way they eat. So that's a real practical thing. And so what does that start to do? It starts to give you a discipline to start to make choices that you can make decisions like, I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to eat this. And so now there's books. Eat this, not that, right? There's all kinds of books about choices, right? But a book can't make you do it. You have to have something in you that says, I want to do that. And
Yeah.
once you make the decision you want to do that, you're going to change your eating. And so that's one of the practical body things you can do in the world, right? Um, but I say everything begins with the mind. And so when you start to think about your mind, you start to think about healing your own childhood. And so I've had people who I've talked to who are tens. They're raised in a good home. But in their lifetime of their 10 years, from birth to 10 years old, that's 55,000 hours of time, 16 hours a day. And so that's a lot of time. That's a lot of events that can happen. And so what'll happen is they'll have some event that'll happen that'll traumatize them. I'm talking about there's a guy that I've talked to not too long ago who talked about being molested by a friend who is a neighbor, right? So this is not a family member. This is a friend. And so he's molested and he's traumatized by the molestation. And so he's so traumatized that he can't stop thinking about it. And because he can't stop thinking about it, now he's really saying, what am I going to do? Because I have to look at this thing that happened to me, right? And that happens both for men and women. Childhood matters. Childhood matters a lot because everything that happens there is stored. And because it's stored, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. So when we're talking about healing, we're talking about healing what happened to you, right? I think even Oprah worked with a psychologist and she wrote a book called What Happened to You. Like, why would she do that?
Yeah.
Because she was a traumatized chaos kid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Sure.
she changed her value system. She literally did that. She went from a zero to a 10, right? Because she's like an example for everybody to see, right? So people can do things because people have done things, right? If one man can do, another man can, right? That idea is if she can, I can. If he can, I can. Because that's why we read stories like Oprah's story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really believe that you fall in love with a pattern that you are familiar with from your
Yes,
childhood.
yes, that's right. That's right. And you can see it because you've examined it. You've examined it. You looked at it, right?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
pattern
Well,
there.
that's definitely what I would say in my case.
Yeah. So that pattern that you're talking about, give me an example of a pattern that you saw in childhood.
Well, a typical pattern that I see in my mother was very self-assertive. She was the dominant force in the household.
Okay. Okay.
So I inevitably always fell in love with strong women, very strong-willed women.
The perfect match. A perfect match. See, I'm the opposite of that. My parents were neither were strong, not strong at all. And so what I did is I got to my 20s, I wanted strength. And so I was wishing for strength subconsciously. And what did I do? I attracted the toughest, hardest woman in the world. And so it was kind of different than you had a pattern. I didn't have a pattern. I just wished I wanted strength because I didn't have any because my parents were not strong people. They never exhibited strength in their lifetime. For me,
The
for
other
me
thing
at
I
least.
really want to talk to you about is what role does desire and sexuality play in a good marriage?
So I like to say sex is the after effect of a great relationship during the day. So why is it an after effect? Because when you have kindness, love, uh, freedom, caring, you start to care about the positive things in the daytime, where you're considerate and you're thinking of the other person. You're starting to give off a feeling that you're important to me. And when you're giving off the feeling that you're important to me, the thing that naturally results from that is a sexual attraction, right? Because that's what happens in movies. In movies, they always show sexual tension. And some of the movies keep the sexual tension going and going, all kinds of things,
Yeah,
right? So they take that sexual attraction, they keep it going, the sexual tension. So you have sexual tension, and when you have kindness and love and like a desire to wish each other well. When you have that feeling in your daytime, there's just a good mood around the two of you. And so, what would be a natural thing for that to happen with sexual tension? It's got to be resolved. It's got to be resolved. And how's it resolved? It's resolved by the sexual relationship, right? So, like, big deal. Who cares about that? And so, what have we done? We've taken sex and made it into a kind of a religion, right? Like we made it very shallow, very empty. We poke holes in it. We made it worthless, right? Why? Because we made it all about bodies. Because it's not all about bodies. It's about the emotions that make up the two people and the kindness and the goodness they share with each other. And when they do, they want to be together. And they want to be together to resolve the sexual tension because that's what sex does. It resolves sexual tension. Because we know what sexual tension looks like in movies. That's why that holds our interest because we want to see the tension resolved in the movie, right? But we want to also see it resolved in our lives,
yeah,
right?
yeah. The
And so,
problem is the movies show us a world that doesn't exist.
but that's all right. They got a script that. That's okay. But it's a good model for us. We can
Yeah,
follow pieces of it, right? And the pieces of there's sexual tension on the screen, there's sexual tension in our lives. What we want to do is not demand, I want to resolve the sexual tension. We don't want to guilt somebody into resolving the sexual tension because guilt and shame and bitterness and right, all that can be tied up with sex. We don't want any of that. What we want is we want a kind relationship to each other during the day so that sexual tension just grows naturally. And as it grows naturally, now we can resolve it.
yeah,
And that's what the sex piece of it. But
yeah.
it's after everything else is done.
For couples listening to this episode, and who are going through a difficult time in their marriage, in their relationship, what is the first advice you would give them?
Um, so the first advice is always change your mind. One person changes their mind. One person. Doesn't take two. Why does it not take two? Because one person changes their mind, and when that one person changes their mind, they start to feel different thoughts. Because uh, let's go to the law of cause and effect. We know about cause and effect. We hear about it. We hear about it in everything, in religion and everything. And so cause and effect is you create a cause when you have a thought. Now, a lot of people don't know that, but when you think a thought, you make a cause. Because after that cause is made, it results in something. It results in you pick up a pencil, you drive your car, you buy groceries, you pick up good food, you pick up bad food. It's all because of the thought you thought, because the thought is the cause. The cause begins everything. And so as you start realizing, well, cause and effect, there's thousands upon thousands of causes and thousands of effects. So if my life is made of thousands and thousands of causes that make thousands and thousands of effects, I have to ask myself, what life do I want to live? If I have something in me that says I want to live an inspiring life, well, what could give me an inspiring life? The thought, the cause. The thought is the cause. And so when you have thousands and thousands of causes, that means thousands and thousands of thoughts. So now you have to think, so I can change my situation just by changing my thinking. And when I change my thinking, I'm going to enter the chain. And the chain starts like this. I start the meaning and the movie. What is the meaning and what is the movie? The movie is the world around you. The meaning is the meaning you give it. First the movie and then the meaning. So when you have a movie of what's happening, then you give it a meaning that's in your mind. The next thing that happens is you get a feeling. And the feeling then creates a belief. And the belief creates an attitude. And the attitude creates an action. That's the chain I'm talking about. And it all begins with the meaning of the movie. And so when you have a movie that's really bad and really painful and really stressing you out, you've got to change your thought because that's changing the cause. Change the cause, and you're going to change the life. Now, is it going to be fast? Maybe it can if you believe it is. If you can believe it's fast, it'll be fast. If you believe it's slow, if you start saying, oh, it's going to take a long time, if you say it's going to take a long time, it's going to take a long time. So I would rather believe if I start changing my cause, I can start now because we're talking about thousands of causes, thousands of thoughts. And that's really what the whole advice of it takes one. It does not take two. It takes one to decide, it takes one to react. One decides, one reacts. And so that's the system. Because all the people that I talk to that are raised at the bottom of the scale, they're all reactors, every one of them. They can't stop reacting. All we need is a person to change the environment of their mind. And that's the person who starts everything.
Yeah.
Because
That's
that's the
really
person,
good advice, Larry.
they're in
And
charge of causes.
and I do want to acknowledge you for the work you do because I think a relationship, an intimate relationship, if it's a happy one, is perhaps heaven on earth, if it's a really happy one. And if we work on that relationship, we have a happy life. And we've heard some really wise advice from you today. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can go to youcansavethis marriage.com. So you can learn about my programs. You can save this marriage, or you can go to Larry Bilotta on YouTube, and I've got a lot of videos on the YouTube channel for Larry Bilotta. So that's two ways to
Yeah,
see what I'm
yeah, I
doing.
will post those links in the show notes below. Thank you so much for being with us today,
Thank
Larry.
you, Reno,
Yeah.
very much. You're a good interviewer.